All right, back on the Young Turks, and now joining us, Stuart Acuff. He's the Director of Organizing for the AFL-CIO, and that means you're a labor man.
It does indeed. For a long time, as you might be able to tell by looking at me.
You're not playing. You used to drive trucks back in the day.
I did, but I've been an organizer for about 32 years now.
No, I know, but I'm like getting your roots.
Right. I drove trucks, moving vans and other kinds of trucks, and I did just about every kind of job that you could do at one point or another in my life.
Did you like or dislike the diner food at the truck stops?
I don't like food at truck stops.
No?
No.
Okay.
And I'm not. Yeah.
It seems like it's a piece of Americana, though. Like I feel
I
feel like you should like it. I feel like I'd like it.
Right. Well, I probably did at first, but by the time you've been over the road for 6 weeks at a time, and you're washing your clothes in truck stops, and you're showering in truck stops, and you're sleeping in the sleeper of a cab, everything gets old.
Yeah, that seems slightly disastrous.
Right, it is indeed, okay. Especially in the summertime in the South.
Oh boy, Jesus and Lord mercy! And that was what, back in the 70s?
Yeah, that was in the late 70s.
Late 70s.
Right.
Wow. Okay. All right. Now, you've been, of course, an organizer for all this time. How do you? Let's break it down to the basics. How do you do that? I mean, do you go into a town and you wrestle up a couple of guys and be like, let's organize the hell out of this thing?
It starts with finding people who want to make a change in their lives, and particularly a change in their work lives. And it starts by finding the folks who other people listen to on the job, and building a committee of leaders, and teaching people how to work collectively. It's something we've forgotten in America in the age of the individual. But organizing is basically about teaching people how to work with each other and how to lift everybody up at the same time. Totally opposite the way corporate media tells us to do it. Not by pushing anybody aside, not by climbing over anybody's back, not by kissing the boss's boot or ratting anybody out, but helping everybody learn how they can lift one another up and their families up all at the same time. I think, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's one of the highest forms of human endeavor, because it's about using the social nature of our species to improve the lives of everybody around us.
But you know what? Let me challenge you on a couple things.
Sure.
Because I think one of the things that bother people about unions is if you don't join, then there is pressure, and then there is consequences, right? Now, I get the reason why you'd want to do that, but do you also get that winds up being a turn-off for some people?
I would take issue with your question. I don't think there is consequences. I think that there can be peer pressure to join, just like in any other setting, but there aren't consequences to not join.
No. Don't get me wrong. I'm not painting it like Joe's going to meet you out back if you don't.
Right.
No. And I'm not even talking about the peer pressure. I mean, like, for your job. For example, I'm in a union. Okay.
Right.
I'm in AFTRA.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you work in a non-union shop and then the union doesn't want to take you back in a union shop, there's those kind of rules, for example. And I think that turns some people off.
I can see where that would.
Right.
Absolutely, and I can totally understand your point there, and I think that's one of the things that, as we evolve with the workforce and with today's work environment, we need to revisit.
Because here's my central thesis on why the unions have lost such a large percentage of the labor force, that you guys are losing the PR battle. Okay, because now politically for the last 30 years you've been getting crushed. Okay, I'm just calling it like I see it. Okay, and it's fairly obvious, right? Now you're on the resurgence, but the reason for that wasn't just that you had politicians who were Republicans and won. When Democrats came into power, they didn't really, deliver a lot of times. And why?
Right.
Because
right.
Because there's this public sentiment that the unions are somehow bad for the economy, bad for the country, etc. The other side has won the PR battle. So how do you reverse that?
I think we're doing that now. I mean, the truth of the matter is that in the last 2 years, we've had the largest growth we've had in a generation. We're polling better than we have since we started polling 25 years ago. And I think that we're polling as well as we are because people want a counterweight to corporate power. I mean, people understand in America that corporate power has gotten way out of control, way out of hand. And people want a counterweight. They look around for who can counter corporate power, and the number one candidate for that is the labor movement. I think that we did go through a time when we lost the PR battle, but I think that time is behind us. And in fact, we're the demographic that we're most popular with, the age demographic, is the 19 to 30-year-olds. And that has, again, a lot to do with us trying to access the blogosphere and work at that, trying to be available and accessible to all kinds of media. It's great to be on your show, for instance. I'm doing, I think, 20 interviews this week.
So let me ask a more specific question on that then, because that sounds encouraging. And we're talking to Stuart Acuff. He's the director of organizing for the AFL-CIO.
And I would say, let me just before you ask the next question, I think if people look at what the unions did in the Obama campaign, and who had the hard conversations in white working class communities about race and class and the future of the country and who's going to control your lives, who really challenged people on their feelings of discrimination or racism in a way that they hadn't been challenged before. It was the unions, and those were hard. Places like Pennsylvania, Indiana, Ohio, those were hard, difficult conversations that absent those, I don't think Obama could have won.
Well, I totally agree with you, and I saw a fantastic, and I feel bad that I forgot who it was, but I saw a fantastic speech before the election.
Richard Trumka, yes. The Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. It's a great speech.
Great speech.
Only one bad reason not to vote for Barack Obama.
Right.
No good reason. Right.
And that was fantastic.
And we did that. That got repeated thousands of times, and in different ways, in different forums, and smaller venues, people's households, at the work site. I probably made a similar speech 1,000 times myself.
Right. Now, the problem, as I see it, and I'm being just, as we always do, completely honest with you guys in terms of public perception, and from my point of view, I could be wrong, is that when the Democrats win, and you guys do a fantastic job of backing Democrats, let's keep it real, okay? That's what happens, right? And they feel beholden to you, but they always wind up screwing you over. The reason is you're an easy target for them to turn around and go, see, we didn't do what the unions wanted. We're nonpartisan, bipartisan. You see what I'm saying?
And we're really moderate.
Right, we're really moderate. And it seems like every time that's the go-to move. See, we screwed the unions. Right. And then it makes me think that you're spending your money in the wrong place.
Right. Well, I can see how you would think that. I think it's much different with President Obama and his administration. Look, he's moving on the priorities that people voted for, which also happen to be our priorities. Universal comprehensive health care, changing the rules on trade, creating an industrial policy, moving to a green economy, and restoring the freedom of workers to form unions and bargain collectively. So I think in the past, sometimes we worked hard in the election and maybe we didn't have a complete agenda. This time we have a complete agenda. Everybody understands what it is. We got the sign off on the agenda before the election, and if you see what's happening both in the administration and in the House and the Senate, what Speaker Pelosi is doing in the House and what Leader Reid is doing in the Senate, you see that they're focused on economic issues, which, by the way, Jen, is how Democrats win, is by focusing on kitchen table economic issues that affect average Americans. And I believe this in the depths of my being, that this time Democrats have to produce real change that changes the quality of people's lives, change that changes the quality of kids' futures. And that means so that every American has health care. That means that we're creating good jobs instead of just bad job after bad job after bad job. That means going back to an economy where people work hard 40 hours a week and can and can aspire to raise their kids in the dignity of the middle class. I think President Obama's on that program with us.
All right.
And so are your listeners, and so is the vast majority of American people.
So, I hear you on that. I think you guys are on the right track. Don't get me wrong. Let me suggest 2 PR campaigns.
Okay?
Okay. And run it by you, see what you think.
You're looking at this old 54-year-old bald guy who obviously doesn't know a whole lot about PR. But
Well, I don't know about that. You guys are pretty savvy. So, stronger together.
right,
Okay. The theme is, first strength. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We're strong, and
Right.
then number 2, together. We're
Right.
all together. Okay.
Right.
So instead of getting painted as, we're going to split up the workers, and you're on this side and you're on that
Right.
side, and et
Right.
cetera, we're stronger together.
you're exactly right.
Okay.
You're exactly right.
Number 2 is, well, before I get to number 2, how do we push this message? I mean, is it having guests on when there's a debate as to what to do with the labor guys? For example, the GM workers, the Chrysler workers. Does Fox News not let you on? Does MSNBC not ask you to come on? How do you get those guys on? And number 2, should you just flat out run commercials?
Well, we are running commercials in support of the Employee Free Choice Act. We intend to spend several $1 million running commercials in support of the Employee Free Choice Act. We don't run positioning or feel-good commercials. I mean, when we
Right.
run a commercial, it's got a specific strategic point that's well tested, because this is people's sweat money. This is these are paid by dues. But
I hear you. But there's value in building a brand. And
That's true.
That's why Coke does it. I mean, Coke doesn't want to waste money.
That's true.
Nike doesn't want to waste money. They believe that gives you good return.
Right.
Right. And the brand, for example, is stronger together.
Right. Right.
The unions are for
And
you, and not for the
and
that would be point number 2, by the way.
Right.
For you.
Right. And that is a very good point. I would argue that when we split up the funds that are accessible to us, we have to prioritize real strategic work, election work, organizing work, policy work that, again, is aimed at changing the quality of people's lives. That, in fact, right now, the best commercial for the labor movement in the United States is President Obama talking about unions, and which he's done openly and honestly and very positively, both before the election and after the election. But you're right. There's a lot of things we could do better. There's no question about that. And one is appealing to people better. We're constantly searching for how to stop staring at our navel and be externally focused. And we do that imperfectly, but it is a priority for us. And
I want to come back to how that affects the Employee Free Choice Act in one quick second. But let me just.
But just to finish your question, I've been on I'm on Fox as often as they invite me, and and I've probably been on Fox 10 times since the Democratic convention. Done 3 interviews in the last 3 months on CNBC, and sometimes the interviews on Fox are very hostile, but it's much better to have a hostile interview and be able to make your point, even if you have to have sharp elbows to get your point made, than it is to cede that airtime to just a negative perception,
yeah.
right? So we actively seek interviews, and we take interviews, hostile or not, and are appreciative of the opportunity to talk to the people of the country.
Okay, so that's happening. Okay, so now let's get to how this affects the Employee Free Choice Act. Because when you talk about that specific issue, I think you have good points. They're going to make counterpoints, and I get all that. But the reason I bring up this foundation is because I feel that you win or lose based on the foundation. Because by the time you get to the specific issue, people have said in their minds either, yes, it would help to lean towards the union at this point in the country's,
Right.
or no, you know what? It's not going to help. It's going to hurt.
Right.
Do you see what I'm
Right,
saying
sure.
by that?
Yeah.
So that informs how they think of the Employee Free
Right.
Choice Act. Is there that recognition within the union?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And we have worked very hard at countering an antiquated, outdated image of unions, and we've worked very hard at making sure people understand that the issues that unions push are the issues that positively affect the majority of Americans. So who stopped the privatization of Social Security? Well, a lot of people, but the foundation of it was the labor movement, you know. Who has been the most outspoken on promoting universal comprehensive health care? The labor movement has. Who did as much as they could to stop Bush's domestic agenda? The labor movement. Who, for the first time in its history, took a position against a war on foreign soil? The AFL-CIO came out against in the invasion of Iraq, and then after the invasion came out against, the continued war and the occupation of Iraq. So the labor movement has always seen itself in this country and every other country as the voice for average workers, whether they were union members or not, and as the engine of the movement for social and economic justice.
It sounds like you're telling me that we're for you.
Right. We are for you.
Okay. All right. Well, look.
Well, you know why we're for you?
Why is that?
Because you're my cousin, you're my brother, you're my sister, you're my aunt, you're my uncle. You know, when I look at union members, I see America. I mean, honest to goodness, you know, we represent about 15% of the American workforce altogether. There's no other institution that represents 15% of the average American. We represent gun owners, we represent pro-choice, we represent pro-life, we represent every spectrum of the every part of the political spectrum, but we focus on those issues that affect the economic quality of people's lives.
Right. And one last piece of needless advice from me. Okay.
No. I'm enjoying this conversation.
Okay. The unions are the underdogs. Okay.
Thank you.
And that's important in American mentality.
Right.
And so they turned liberal into a bad word. They turned union into a bad word.
Right.
Okay. The conservative media did.
Right.
And the corporations did. Now, if you let people know, hey, you know what? The corporations spent a lot of money to turn union into a dirty word
Right.
for a reason.
Right.
Because we were trying to look out for you.
And
we're the underdogs.
And here's the way I say that, because I say it a lot. Look, we exist to push down wealth and power from those who have too much to those who have too little. And in the corporate-funded media, we're always going to be unpopular for that reason. But understand that absent this counterweight to corporate power, John McCain is president, Tom DeLay is Speaker of the House, and Mitch McConnell is running the Senate.
God, that sounds so damn scary.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Yeah.
We don't have a minimum wage.
Right. And, my bottom line on this is I think that, as with all things, there's a spectrum. And sometimes things lean too far to the right, sometimes too far to the left, in any country, including this country, right? And sometimes it might be in any country that that unions have too much power or too little power, right? And I think it's inarguable at this point that the unions don't, the country could be helped by the unions having a little bit more power.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, there might come a day when you guys have too much power.
Right.
But we're not near that day.
Not near that day, man.
Right.
Not near that
And that's
day.
why,
regardless
of the details of the Employee Free Choice Act, I feel like we need to put a thumb on the scale in favor of the unions at this juncture.
Thank you. Let me tell you what's really at stake here. In part because who your listeners are, and in part because who your team is. if we don't change America right now in very fundamental ways, my generation, 54 years old, will be the first generation in the history of this country to leave our kids and grandkids less than what was left to us. That's across ethnic lines, it's across gender lines, it's across regional lines. The history of America, from the beginning, from the colonies, has been the struggle to leave each succeeding generation better off. And we are, if we hadn't made the change we made last November, we would have been the first generation to leave the succeeding generations worse off. So that's what's at stake. That's really what's at stake. It's in whose interest is this economy going to work? We now know that we now have proof positive, 30 years of failed trickle-down economics, that if you leave the wealth and money at the top, it stays at the top. It doesn't trickle down. It might tinkle down, but it doesn't trickle down. And that if we're going to lift this country out of the ditch that it's in now, we have to give workers the ability to bargain collectively with their employers for a greater share of the wealth that we produce every day.
Yeah, and I read this stat somewhere about how, I'm not going to get it exactly right now, but the top 100 company CEOs used to get 45 to 1 of the average employee, which is a healthy difference, 45 to 1.
Right.
But now it's in the ballpark of what?
400 to 1.
I read somewhere 1,500 to 1.
Right.
For
depends
the top.
on it depends on who they measure, but yeah,
right, exactly.
It's 400 conservatively. It's 400 to 1.
Right, and that's too much.
It's ridiculous.
Because why I say it's too much as a matter of logic, not as a matter of emotion. I don't say it because hey, shouldn't we get more, right? Technically, I'm the CEO of the Young Turks.
Right.
but so it's not that. It's a matter of, well, if I'm going to run a business and I'm a shareholder in that business, right? I don't think that logically it's going to do the business any good for the CEO to get that much money.
Right.
You're not getting value out of that.
That's right.
In fact, he's going to want to cheat in his own interests rather than the corporate
Hello.
Right. So that's why I'm talking about.
I think we figured that out.
Right. At this juncture in American history, that's why
you want an even more astounding statistic, which your listeners don't know. In the last 30 years, worker productivity in America has gone up by 75%. For 20 of those years, wages were stagnant, flatlined. The last 10 years, wages have declined. Average take-home pay today is less than it was in 1973. Median family wealth is less than it was in 2001. Workers are slipping behind as we produce more and more wealth.
It's just not right.
It's not right.
All right. Stuart Acuff, Director of Organizing for the AFL-CIO.
Jim,
really
thanks a million.
Conversation.
It was a great conversation. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll be right back. Young Turks.